Hi friends, Miss Kristi here, and I am so excited to be together again cooking in the kitchen. Today we are learning how to make homemade tortilla chips. With just 3 ingredients and a couple minutes in the oven, we are able to make tortilla chips right at home that I think taste better than the store. We're gonna have fun making these together today, and I'm so glad you're here. Now, the first step to cooking and working in the kitchen is to wash our hands. While I wash my hands with soap and warm water for at least 20 seconds, let's go over the ingredients and supplies that you'll need to gather to cook along today. The ingredients you need are 4 corn tortillas, 2 teaspoons of olive oil, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. The supplies you'll need are a baking sheet, oven mitts for safety, a small bowl, 1 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon, a pizza cutter, a pastry brush, and parchment paper, which is optional. Okay, great. My hands are clean and your hands are clean. We've gathered our ingredients and supplies. So let's get started making these homemade tortilla chips. And they're, like I said, really easy to make. Just a couple steps, a few ingredients. The first step we need to do is preheat our oven to 350 degrees. That's what our tortilla chips are going to bake on. So I'm gonna preheat my oven to 350. All right, while our oven is preheating, let's put together our homemade tortilla chips. So step 1 is going to be grab your baking sheet and put it in front of you, because that's kind of where we're gonna do all of our work. And if you have the parchment paper, this would be the time to put it on your baking sheet. As I always say, it's optional. It makes cleanup a little bit easier. Some things don't stick to your baking sheet, so I like to use it. So if you have it, place it on the baking sheet. And now we're going to grab our 4 corn tortillas. So I have them on a little plate here. Now you can use corn tortillas, or I've actually tried this with almond tortillas too. If you can't have corn or you like the flavor of almond flour tortillas better, you can use an almond flour tortilla. It cooks a little bit differently as far as timing, but we'll talk about that later. So take your corn tortillas, we've got 4 of them, and just place them right on your baking sheet. Kind of spread them out. Now if yours don't fit well, you can maybe just do less, maybe do 2 or 3. I kind of have a bigger baking sheet, so 4 works well. So place them right in front of you, and then I'm gonna kind of scoot them over here, and we're gonna measure our olive oil. So grab your olive oil, and then your small little bowl, and your 1 teaspoon. We need 2 teaspoons of olive oil that we're gonna brush onto our corn tortillas. So you're gonna take the one that says 1 TSP, and just measure out a teaspoon and dump it in your little bowl. And then measure out 1 more. We need 2 teaspoons of olive oil. Now, if you think the olive oil, maybe it's a little bit too strong of a flavor for you, you could always use a grapeseed oil or a vegetable oil, really any type of cooking oil. I use a lot of olive oil. So that's what I have in my house, which is why I'm using it. But if you have a different oil that you like to cook with, as long as it's kind of like a neutral flavor, it'll work well when we brush it on our corn tortillas. All right, so you have your tortillas in front of you. We just measured out 2 teaspoons of olive oil, so you can set your olive oil aside, your teaspoon aside. We won't need that anymore. And now, this is the fun part, I think. You get to take your pastry brush, dunk it into your olive oil, and we are just going to brush both sides of our tortilla with our cooking oil. Now, if you don't happen to have a pastry brush at home, no worries. You can always just use like the back of a spoon. So you could drizzle it on here and then just use a spoon to spread it around. Or if you have another method that you found works well for spreading things, really, we're just using it to get our entire corn tortilla covered with our cooking oil or our olive oil. So just kind of brush it on. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to look pretty, as long as it is covering your tortilla. That is the goal. And then we need to flip them over. So once you have both sides, you need to flip, as we need to brush the back. If you happen to use a lot of oil, olive oil, and you run out, don't worry, you can always just measure another teaspoon into your little bowl and keep going. Some tortillas like to soak up the oil more than others. So if you run out, not a big deal, just measure a little bit more, maybe one more teaspoon, and then finish brushing your tortillas. All right, so once we have all of our tortillas nicely slathered with oil, you can set your pastry brush aside and you can set your little bowl done, because we're done with those. And now, I think this is the other fun part of making these. Grab your pizza cutter. We are going to cut each tortilla into 8 little triangles. And I'll show you how we're gonna do that. And then we sprinkle them with salt. But first we wanna cut them into little triangles. So you're just basically going to take your pizza cutter and carefully just cut your tortilla in half. And then you kind of cut your half in half. Basically like a little pizza. So if you've ever cut a pizza, this is basically what we're doing. We're making 8 little triangles out of our tortillas. Okay. So same thing, we're just gonna do that on all 4 tortillas. We cut it in half, and then we cut our half in half. And then one final time, we cut each triangle that we've made in half one more time. And like I said, I've tried this using an almond flour tortilla because I eat a lot of almond flour tortillas, and it turns out really good too. These end up baking for 14 minutes. If you were to use an almond flour tortilla, if that's what you have at your house, you can switch that out. It would only cook for 10 minutes. The almond flour is a lot more thin than the corn tortilla, and it doesn't need as much time to bake. So that's my little side note. If you choose a different type of tortilla, the baking time might just be a little bit different. You can experiment, because when you cook for yourself in the kitchen, it's kind of about learning what works best and what tastes best to you. And you kind of have to trial and error. All right, so we have our 4 corn tortillas cut into 8 pieces each, and then you're just going to spread it out a little bit. You want to give them some room to cook on your sheet to the best of your ability. Try not to have any overlapping, because we want them each to have a chance to bake and get a little bit golden. Some of them might be touching, which is okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can set your pizza cutter down, because we're done with that. And our last step before they go in the oven is to sprinkle them with salt. So grab your salt and your 1/4 teaspoon. So it's going to be the small one. It says TSP 1/4 TSP. And then you're just going to scoop out 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And very carefully, we're gonna sprinkle them onto our little tortilla chips that we've made. So you can kind of just take it and carefully sprinkle right from our teaspoon here. If you get a lot of salt on one of them, it's not the end of the world. It's gonna taste a little salty, but it's okay. Another way you can do this too is you can dump it in your hand. So if that's a little bit too hard to shake, it does take a kind of a lot of patience and precision just to not have it all fall out. You can just dump it in your hand like I just did, and then you can kind of pinch and then sprinkle. I think that's a little bit easier, but I want to give you options. You can try either way. So you kind of just pinch and sprinkle, and you don't have to use all of the salt that we measured. It's just kind of the smallest teaspoon that most people have in their house. So if you get them all sprinkled and you feel like each little tortilla chip has some salt, you don't have to use it all. You can just then brush it off. All right, so we're done with our salt. You can put that to the side. And we have actually finished assembling our homemade tortilla chips. So again, we laid out our tortillas, brushed them with olive oil, sprinkled them with salt, and now they're going to go into our oven for 14 minutes, okay? I know it's a random time, but trust me, 14 minutes is usually the best option. But definitely we're gonna keep an eye on them. If they look like they're getting a little bit brown, then we're just gonna turn off our oven and take them out. But 14 minutes is a good starting spot, so I'm gonna set my timer here for 14 minutes. And then I'm going to put them in, and as soon as our timer goes off, then I'm going to put my oven mitts on and take them out, and we're gonna let them cool. But let's get them in the oven for 14 minutes, and then we'll talk about it when our timer goes off. All right, friends, our 14-minute timer just went off. So now we're going to turn off our oven and put our oven mitts on for safety and take out our homemade tortilla chips and let them cool on the counter, like on a protected area, for about a minute so our pan is not hot to touch. So we're gonna turn off the oven, take them out, and let them cool for about a minute. All right, friends, so it's been about a minute or so. Really the big thing here is just to make sure that your pan is not hot when we go to take off our tortilla chips. So about a minute or two, let the pan cool. And now I just have like a little bowl that I'm going to pop them into. But you can kind of see they're crispy and they're warm. And there's gonna be a little bit of salt on them, so they're gonna be a little bit salty. But this, my friends, like I said, is just an easy, super simple snack that, like sometimes if you go to a restaurant and you get tortilla chips and they come out like warm and crispy, that's how you can make them yourself. And it's fun. We get to use a pizza cutter. We brushed on some oil, some olive oil. But here we have it. So I just popped a couple in a bowl. This is something that you would want to eat right away. If you don't finish them all, maybe share them. Come back to them a little bit later. They're not going to stay great overnight or the next day. So I would definitely cook as many as you think you can eat at once, and then just make them again the next time you want them. So I do hope you try and make these. Try and make them again, like I said, and when you do, let me know how it goes. Leave me a comment, let me know if you have any questions. You can even send me a picture of how your homemade tortilla chips turned out. Maybe you decided to dunk them in something or put some toppings on them. Your choice, and maybe we'll get to share it on next week's episode. Now, speaking of next week, on next week's episode, which is episode 25, we are learning how to make a peanut butter cup smoothie. Chocolate and peanut butter are a classic flavor combination, and when we pop a few ingredients in a blender, we end up with a smoothie that tastes just like a peanut butter cup. In order to cook along and make that peanut butter cup smoothie next week, these are the ingredients that you'll need to have in your kitchen. 1/4 cup of milk, 1/4 cup of ice, 1 frozen banana, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, and 2 tablespoons of hot cocoa mix. Well, friends, our time together today is almost over. It went by so fast because this was such a quick snack to make. But I do hope you had fun making the homemade tortilla chips. I know I did, and I already can't wait to cook together again next time. But before you say goodbye to this episode, make sure to click subscribe if you haven't already. You just have to click the little picture of me in the corner. That way you don't miss next week's episode. It'll be out on Friday, and I'll see you then. Bye, friends.